I was quite naive. I didn't realize that becoming a coach was 50% of it. And the other 50% is the marketing, getting people aware that you actually exist. And I really didn't appreciate that I was going to be an entrepreneur.
Hey, Boss Mama, welcome back to the show. This is the space where we explore building a business you love, raising your family, and creating a life that works for you. I'm your host, Manushka Elephant, marketing coach and fellow mom entrepreneur. Let me ask you, what happens when a former high school teacher struggling with parenting overwhelm discovers a coaching method so powerful it changes her life, career, and mission? Emily Hughes didn't just learn to parent differently. She launched a business to help others do the same. And today we're asking a big question. How can mom entrepreneurs build a sustainable business while parenting with empathy? I sat down with conscious parenting coach and entrepreneur Emily Hughes, who left her 10-year teaching career to launch a business supporting families and in the process had to confront burnout, overworking, and the hard truths of starting from scratch. From nervous system regulation and leadership in parenting to building a business rooted in your values. This episode is a vulnerable, powerful conversation about creating a life that feels aligned, not overwhelming. Hey, Boss Mama! Welcome to the show, empowering mompreneurs to thrive in business and motherhood. Let's get started. Hi, Emily. Welcome to the show. I'm really happy to have you with me on Hey, Boss Mama. Please tell us a little bit about you and your journey, because I know that you've been through quite a transformation.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So, I am a conscious parenting coach, which basically means I work with parents and mums, dads, and I also work with couples as well. Because the way I see it is parenting is a job. And in any other career, you get so much support. You get training, weekly review meetings, performance reviews. You might even get coaching. And in parenting, you get nothing. And so, really, I'm here to fill that gap and help parents who are struggling. Like a lot of the parents who come and see me are struggling with anger, with just yelling all of the time. And really, that's also my journey why I became a conscious parenting coach, was because I used to be a secondary school teacher, high school teacher. And then when I had children, I was floundering and I went to go see a conscious parenting coach. And I'd done a lot of therapy in the past, but I found this to be the most transformational thing I'd ever done. And I was really looking for a way out of teaching. And one of my friends said to me, "You've been raving so much about this parent coaching. Maybe you could do that." And I thought, maybe I could. It's probably like the most important conversation I've ever had, sort of changed the course of my life. And then I also trained in somatics breath work, because parenting is this full body experience. So somatic being of the body. And sometimes just talking about things doesn't quite cut it. We need to find out what the body is holding onto, what the body has to say, because our bodies are constantly giving us lots of information. And if you've got a body anything like mine, it's very noisy. So, that's really my path, how I came into what I'm doing.
Lovely. I'm picking up on so many things that I want to discuss. First of all, yes, the body. We always try to separate our bodies and our minds, but we're one whole, we're holistic. And very often people miss that point. And it's the same thing whether it's with us or with our kids. And when it comes to parenting, I feel like we often say that the parent is responsible for the child, but the child is causing the situation. Whereas it's a whole system, and again, a holistic system where we're interacting with them, but they're learning from us, and we're also reverberating some of the energy that they're giving us, right?
Definitely 100%. I always say that we're not in the business of fixing the parent or fixing the child, but we're about tending to the dynamic between the parent and the child, because that's where we might need to focus our attention and bring a lot of love and soothing into that, how we relate to each other. So, yeah, bringing
Hmm.
in tools like communication and also bringing in, yeah, that body awareness and awareness of the nervous system, because so often we've been conditioned to believe that all behavior is in the child's willful control or the adult's willful control. But actually, another way of looking at it is we're a big old bag of nerves, and our nervous systems are constantly moving from calm up into fight or flight. And obviously, with a child, their nervous system, they're new, they're fresh. So, looking at all behavior, the parent and the child, through the lens of the nervous system can be a really de-shaming way of looking at parenting, because it just brings in that kind of empathy piece of, oh, like, I'm struggling. I've gone into fight in my nervous system. Oh, my child's struggling. They've gone into fight in their nervous system. And I just think it just brings in so much more empathy and just greater understanding of ourselves as, you use the word holistic, like holistic beings, not just brains on vehicles.
Yeah, exactly. And so take us through your business journey. So you already had your two sons when you started this. How old were they? How did it go?
Yeah. So I would say, in some respects, I started my business at the wrong time. And I will go into why that is in a bit. So I went to go see this conscious parenting coach when my children were 1 and 3. And then the pandemic happened. And I was like looking to get out of teaching, and I started the training for that. But I was quite naive because I just thought, oh, I'll become a coach. And I didn't realize that becoming a coach was 50% of it. And the other 50% is the marketing, getting people aware that you actually exist. And I really didn't appreciate that I was going to be an entrepreneur. And that was quite a shock for me, because I think if someone had said to me, you're going to become an entrepreneur, I would have probably been more wary, because I know that I am very entrepreneurial, but I also know that I am prone to overworking and burnout. And in a way, I think I went into this whole journey a bit naively, and I've had to really work on boundaries around my energy, because my natural state is to have no boundaries and just work, 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 work when I'm excited about something. And that's been a really big part of my journey, is having boundaries on overworking. Is interesting, actually, because when I first started my business, it actually mirrored when I first had my first son. And because often having a business is like birthing a business, having a new baby. And in my early parenting journey with my son, my eldest son, was a journey like of hypervigilance. I was just so hypervigilant, just like on high alert for any kind of threat and danger, which wasn't really real, but that's where my nervous system was at. And then I birthed my business, and I was really in the same state of just hypervigilance, looking out for threat. And it took me a long time to really calm down and have boundaries on my energy and move away from hypervigilance around my business. What hypervigilance looked like was so much checking, just checking of everything, checking whether I'd made spelling mistakes, checking whether I'd had emails, a real frantic energy that I was going about my business. It wasn't serving me and was not serving my children either.
That's really tough because, first of all, we don't know what it's going to be like, what we're going to be like until we start. So there's no preparation that we can do in advance. And it's a reflection I'm going through at the moment is how much is it good to have lower boundaries when we start, just so that we can get some momentum and some traction. And in some ways, hustle, even though it has a better reputation, there are times when it makes sense. But it's also like, when is it enough? When are you satisfied with the fact that you also need to have that balance and that equilibrium where you have work, you have life, you also have your family? So, how do you get all of that to work in harmony so that you don't burn out, you don't make yourself crazy, but you're also happy with what you've accomplished? That's really difficult.
I will say one of the things that was really positive around this sort of unbounded creative energy that I had at the start of my business was I launched my business really quickly compared to other people who had done the same training course with me. Some of them took a year to get their website up and running. My website was up and running within a month. My Instagram was up and running within a month. It was a crazy month, but I got a lot done. But then you're right. I think that energy of, because it's a creative energy. I think being an entrepreneur is so much about creativity. And I often don't think those words are spoken about enough, but I do feel like it is such a creative process being an entrepreneur. And I think it really did serve me at the beginning, but then exactly as you said, knowing when to stop. That's what I struggled with that first 6 months. I really needed boundaries and was struggling to put them into place. I've got a lot stronger boundaries now.
You mentioned as well how you didn't think about the marketing. Being an entrepreneur, it's not just about being really good and knowledgeable about what it is that I do, but it's also telling people about it. But it's impossible to be good at everything, to have the bandwidth for everything as well. How do you know that some things must wait because you can't do it all? Still, you need to get the word out. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen. How was that process for you? Is it something that you did everything yourself, or did you find some help?
I pretty much did everything myself, which is crazy because you're not skilled in all of these things and you're having to be in that kind of, yeah, that you use the word hustle, but it's like this hustling, bustling energy to learn how to do stuff. And one thing I did outsource, if you like, was my mindset stuff. So I went to go see a confidence coach for 4 sessions. And actually, that really helped because I feel like, in a way, I had some skills. So I used to be a media studies teacher. And in a way, I was teaching kids marketing. And although it was that kind of, 15-year-old level, I felt like I had a little grounding in how to do some of the stuff. I also did join a business membership program for a while, which was really good. One of the things is being a mum as well is I work part time. I pick my kids up from school every day, which is something like that is always been really important to me as part of how I want to curate my life. But it also means there's only so many hours in a week. And my default state is I'm quite prone to anxiety. So, like, blocking out times for my mental health as well. And so that's been a big part of it is actually figuring out how many hours do I have in the week? And it's not actually that many. And I think when I first started out, I was acting like I was working a 40-hour week, when in reality, I was working a 20-hour week. And that's how I want to live my life. And that's a choice that I want to make. But part of the journey is like living that and like really being mindful of I only have this number of hours. So, and part of that can be outsourcing stuff as well, because it's like, do I actually have the number of hours in the week to do this, plus coach my clients who I've got, plus be writing my newsletter, doing my social media? There's only so many hours in the week and being much more mindful of that.
Yeah, that's really tough because we're often looking at businesses that are already established that this is what I want to accomplish. Like, I want to be at that level. But how many years did it take to get there when they might have even a team that's backing all of that effort, all that work? And we have to be very much managing our own expectations because it's going to take us time to get there, or maybe it's never going to happen because we have certain priorities first. And I think that's a question I've been asking myself. Is there a difference here between male entrepreneurs and female entrepreneurs? Are we making the same things our priorities? Because I feel like men are looking more at their legacy, like they want to build a big business, even if that means that they're going to spend less time with their kids in the present. Whereas for women, I feel like it's different. It's more about getting that time and money freedom so that we can spend the time with our family. and have that flexibility that we're looking for. So I'm really wondering, but probably there's no one answer. It's more like, how do I want it to be for me? What is it that I'm looking for? And then does it make sense? Because we're putting a lot of time and effort into our businesses, but we also need to get some return on that investment. Otherwise, it's just not going to be sustainable. And it's not an easy balance to get there.
And, at the end of the day, like, I think one of the things is you don't want your business to be an expensive hobby. It has to be earning money. Well, for lots of reasons, like practical financial security reason. But then also from an energetic perspective, if you're just splurging your energy out and not getting anything in return, which I think can be what I've seen happen with people I know who've started their own business as mums. But I think one of the things I like about having my own business and being a mum is this idea that I get to curate a life that serves me and serves my children. I often feel like I'm getting into overworking. I return to that phrase, this is my life and I get to curate this. But I will say that I do recognize that I have the privilege to work part time and have a business that I work part time because my husband's wage supports that. And obviously, not every woman will have that. One of my values, I would say, is sustainability. And that comes into all aspects of my life. So I want my business to be sustainable, to not burn me out, to be here for the long run. I want to be doing this in 20 years' time. So it has to be sustainable. And then that's also a word I bring into my coaching as well, because when I'm working with clients, I want to give them sustainability so that basically, if I see someone who's got a 3-year-old, I want them to be set up so that they feel confident even when their children are teenagers. So really kind of like rooting my business in those value words. What are the values of my business? I've actually got a sheet up here. I did this with my friend. It's a bit random, but it's got my ideal clients at the top. And then it says my values are sustainability, empowerment, and growth, but not growth as in a sort of 10K month growth, more like a sort of slow, steady, rooted growth. I've also got here, stay classy. Whenever I'm on social media, that's a big value for me. Stay classy. Don't get argumentative with trolls. Just stay classy because that's an important boundary piece for me. If I feel like I'm going into my lower self, sometimes a tricky place on social media, but that one is always a big one for me. Stay classy. And I've also got here down in my values, like nervous system, like being aware of my nervous system as I go about my business. And I actually think it's interesting to think about the business having a nervous system too. Actually, I was working with a client for parent coaching, but we ended up talking a bit about his business because he was an entrepreneur. I said, what's the nervous system of your business? And he said, the nervous system of my business is in flight mode, as in like everything was like panicked and rushing and everything was like running and urgent. What's the nervous system of your business like? Are you constantly feeling like you're fighting, or are you running, or are you feeling secure, calm, sustainable in the way that you run your business?
That's something I'm going to have to think about for my own business. I'm not really sure what's my answer right now and what I would like it to be. But in order to do more, so you have the one-on-one coaching, but you've also developed a class, right?
I have 4 things I do. So the main thing I do is the one-to-one coaching or 1-to-2 coaching. I see a lot of couples. And then I do like webinars, like free webinars, just as a way of getting people on my mailing list. And I maybe do about 4 of them a year. And then I also do workshops, which are paid workshops. And I suppose the difference between the webinar and the workshop is in the webinar, I sort of illuminate and find clarity on the issue, but then you don't really give people the answer to the issue, but you give them enough that it feels like they've got clarity. And then in the workshop, I'll give them like solid stuff. One of the things that I notice about myself, which I really need to work on, is I do too many different things. And one of my things I know I need to do is do fewer things, repeat them, and do them rather than being in this scattered energy, which is my default. And I see it very clearly. but I've yet to implement that.
Yeah. I think it's also part of being creative. We get a lot of ideas, and there's always something cool and shiny that we really want to try. But then where do we get the most impact? What's the 20% that creates the 80% result kind of thing? And that's where we really need to focus. Let's go a little bit deeper now into your skills and knowledge because I'm also a little bit curious for my own life and my own son. So, my son is turning 1 this week, tomorrow. And I can already see some little traits that I'm like, we have to be careful not to reinforce because we don't want to end up with a kid who's like throwing tantrums or things like that. And we want to keep that family harmony. What are some tips you would give to parents so that they don't need to come and see you? Hey, boss mama, you don't need more fluff. You need a business bearing partner. Someone who can help you clarify your goals, challenge your ideas, and hold you accountable like a pro. That's what my one-on-one coaching is for. If you're ready for high-level support with a mompreneur who gets it, visit heybossmama.com/coaching and let's get to work.
Well, in a way, I would say that everybody should seek support in their parenting, whether it be through a coach or whether it be through having a really tight support network of friends who actively invest in and friends who have similar values in the way that you parent, because those friends are gold. So, in a way, I would say one of the things is get support because the way that we parent nowadays, we've been led to believe that the nuclear family is normal. Nuclear family is weird. The nuclear family accounts for 2%. In the history of humans, we're the 2% who parent in the nuclear family. And 98% of humans have parented together in community, in tribes, bringing up children together. The first thing I would say is it's not normal. So if you're finding things hard, then of course, because we're parenting in a really uniquely strange way and just appreciating that. And so I would say people need support because we were never meant to parent in so much isolation. Another thing I would say is accepting that raising humans is inherently messy. And tantrums are normal physiological, psychological processes. And when you start looking at them like that, a toddler having a tantrum, this is a normal psychological, physiological process that my child is responding to overwhelm, then stuff gets easier because so many of us have been conditioned to believe that everything is our child manipulating us. And when we're in that mindset of we're being manipulated, we get really rigid and actually we perpetuate tantrums. We perpetuate whining. We perpetuate these behaviors that we've been conditioned to see as bad. But when we're actually accepting that raising emotionally intelligent humans is messy, tantrums are going to happen, children are going to be whiny. If we are able to stay more calm and sturdy and resilient through that, it's going to happen less naturally. Because when we're able to show up with empathy for our child during a tantrum, the tantrum ends quicker. If we show up with kind of rigidity and harshness to our child when they're having a tantrum, the tantrum's going to last longer and will be more frequent. And it's this thing of what we've been conditioned to believe this is what's actually real for us as human beings. And so I would say a big part of what I do, it's parent coaching, but I would say it's leadership coach because parenting is the ultimate leadership role that anybody who's a parent will ever have in their life. It's the ultimate leadership role. And if you were a leader in the workplace, you would be getting support because leaders need support in order to be good leaders. So I talk about parenting as being benevolent leadership. And it's a bit like wise elders. How can we be wise elders? And how can we be raising wise elders in our children too?
Now, I definitely feel lucky that I have the support of my parents and my mom physically, because every week she takes my son for a few afternoons. But it's more than that. I think one of the things that was difficult also when I started my motherhood journey in parallel to my entrepreneurship is that you're isolated as an entrepreneur, but you're also isolated when you have a newborn. And you have that combination of both where you need people that you can exchange with, get support, but also just vent with in a way, because we need to be able to express ourselves and get things off of our chests. And it's not always easy. And having grandparents, not everybody has that, but a lot of people have that in their lives. It's amazing, but it's also our own parents and it comes with its own weight. And so having an external group, preferably friends or people that are professionals in that field, I'm sure that it makes a huge difference because you get people that can understand where you're coming from.
You need solidarity as a parent and solidarity as an entrepreneur. That word solidarity is so important.
It makes a big difference. And we're part of a community, of a group, and that feeling of belonging and everything else that goes together. But I wanted to touch on what you were saying about the tantrum and the way that we handle it and all of that, because it's true that our kids are not going to be static images. And one of the things that I'm really careful about is screens. So I see a lot of families around me where screens are a way to soothe kids and basically get them hypnotized so that they don't do any tantrums and they don't act out and everything like that, which is really sad. But the other end is, how do we also have outlets for our kids to deal with that energy that they have? And it's not by being at a desk at school, it's not going to be with a phone or a PlayStation or whatever device. They need to be outside. They need to be able to get that testosterone, especially for the little boys, out. And at the same time, it's how do we help them with the behavior? And you'll probably correct me about that, but I feel sometimes when we see kids doing tantrums, it's also because there's a lack of boundaries. And you have to find that special place where boundaries don't come out of nowhere. They make sense for the kid. Because then, if it makes sense, then it's not just my parents being authoritative, it's coming from a place of love.
And one of the big things that I work with clients on is setting boundaries that are linked to values. So it's like, what are your personal values? And then you set boundaries that are in alignment with those values. And when you do that, you as a parent feel a lot sturdier in setting boundaries, because sometimes we're setting boundaries and we're like, why am I setting this boundary? Is this the right boundary to set? Is this just my parents' boundary? And those kind of boundaries are stressful for children because ambiguity is really stressful for children. Like, is my parent going to buckle on this or are they going to hold it? That gray area is really stressful for children. But if a boundary is set and everybody is aware of the boundary and the parent is really rooted in why that boundary is important, then stuff flows in the family a lot more easily. And the key thing here is children need boundaries, but they're not necessarily going to like the boundaries. But if you are calm and certain in why you've set the boundary, why it's important, how it links to your long-term goals, then you are able to like support and find empathy for your child as they struggle with the boundary. And I think it's when parents are like in that state of like doubt, as in, what is the boundary? Is this the right boundary? Or setting the boundary because they're exasperated. So there's a difference between boundaries which are set intentionally and boundaries which are set from fear and exasperation. And those ones are a lot more stressful for everybody.
Quick question. The issue I have with my son at the moment is mostly that he throws food on the floor. And I know that's a common thing with little kids, right? And so I went online, I did a quick search, and it said, you probably reinforced a negative behavior by reacting. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Like, okay, don't tell him not to throw food on the floor, but I still need to pick it up. I can't just leave it all on the floor. And how do I get him to understand that he either puts it in his mouth or he can keep it on the table? He doesn't need to eject everything from his high chair. And that's hard. How do you explain a boundary to a child that doesn't have the vocabulary to hear it or to explain it as well?
One of the things here is in children all the way up until the teen years, they are not sophisticated enough in their way of thinking. They just want your energy, right? And they're not sophisticated enough to be able to discern between positive or negative. They just want your energy because your energy equals survival to that child on a very primitive level. So children are always wanting their parents' energy and attention. So one of the best ways in which we can go about things is just modeling what you want to see. So this is the thing when we're highly reactive as parents, which makes an awful lot of sense if people are highly reactive. That makes so much sense because most of us were modeled high reactivity. We are giving the model to our children that panic and high reactivity, and I know this is not quite what you were saying, but it's like explosiveness is the way to be. And actually, when we more calmly just model the behavior we want to see, it takes a little longer and it takes more trust on behalf of the parent. But ultimately, we get to this is the thing, it's about parenting for the long term. And parenting for the short term is often very snappy, very reactive. And parenting for the long term is trusting that if you continue to model what the behaviors that you want to see, and whilst also setting boundaries, but from that calm, centered, and grounded place, then you'll get there. It's maybe hard to imagine when your child is very small, but like imagining your child at 16. I think this is a really powerful thing to do, to just once a week, just visualize your child at 16, visualize your child at 25, visualize your child at 30. Because so often we get hung up in the right now and we catastrophize. But actually, what if we looked further into the future? What if everything works out? What if at 16, we've got, a great teenager? What if at 25, we have a thriving 25-year-old? And so often our brain does this, but in a scary way. We go to, my child's doing this now, we're going to have problems, right? What if we did the opposite, in which we expansively look forward in time? What if it all works out?
I feel like I trust that he's going to be fine. It's just in the present. How do we smooth the little things that can get annoying? And of course, that's going to change with his age and his development. But the food throwing, the very high pitched screams, little things that are just like when you're already tired, it's just so difficult. But I'm curious, could you give me an example of maybe a family that was in an extreme kind of situation and how you were able to help them transform their harmony in their family life?
Yeah. So take an example of a family I was working with. And one of the things you say there with the high pitched screams and like the mess of the food, one of the things that was really coming up for this family is they had three children and it was a couple. And particularly the husband was just wildly overstimulated. And this is the key thing, right? Parenting in houses with noisy children is overstimulating in a sensory level. One thing that can be reassuring is the study's been done that actually a child who feels comfortable to make noise is an emotionally secure child, because children who don't feel comfortable to make noise, if you think about that for a second, that's a child who doesn't feel safe and a child who ultimately is not going to be emotionally secure. That can be reassuring for some people to hear. And this is the thing, children are loud, and accepting that children are loud. Now, we obviously don't want our children to be feral loud. We want them to understand that they are people in the world and their actions have consequences on other people. We don't want to take screaming children out to restaurants. Children need boundaries, of course. But this family I was working with just first off was working on that the parents were overstimulated. So working on them and their bodies and their nervous systems to feel more safe. And this is the thing, a lot of us are parenting from a nervous system baseline of wired but tired in our nervous system. So our baseline is like up here, and then their kids are making lots of noise, and then it doesn't take much for them to go all the way up to here. And actually working on bringing the nervous system baseline down a bit so that they can be more nimble in their nervous system responses. I also work with a lot of people, and a couple had this as well, who had children who are trickier to deal with. And the reason why they're trickier to deal with is actually because they have strong leadership skills. And framing it in that way actually completely shifts everything, because the child who's not easily obeying, that child has got strong survival skills and strong leadership skills. Because a child who passively obeys their parent all the time unquestioningly, that's either a child who is just more of a natural follower, or it's a child who's unsafe, because it's unsafe for a child to always be passively obeying, because that child's probably scared. Actually, reframing it as the child who doesn't easily obey is probably a child who has those natural leadership skills. And it's about how can we help the family to empower the child's leadership skills so that they can feel empowered. Because this is the thing, empowered children don't have to fight so much for power. If you can give your child healthy opportunities for power, and a lot of parents, they hear that and they're like, oh, I can't give my child any power because then they'll be entitled and spoiled. But the thing is, if your child is constantly seeking power and you never give them any power, then you are going to have a miserable life with your child, because you're going to be in constant conflict. So finding ways to give the child healthy, or even like the illusion of power. Now, obviously, the parent is always in the natural authority because they're the parent, right? But giving that child who's got strong leadership skills opportunities for them to feel empowered, in control, powerful in their own lives, they're going to be seeking power much less in times where it's inappropriate for them to seek power. It's basically like they've got a power bucket. You fill it up in healthy ways, they're going to seek it less in those times when you need them to do what you're actually asking them to do.
I really like what you said about the screaming is actually an indication of someone healthy, because I was telling myself like sometimes he's not always easy because he's moving all over, he wants to grab everything, he's so interested about everything, but it is a positive thing. I wouldn't want him to be passive and asleep. Like it wouldn't make any sense for me to want my child to be like this. And I definitely feel like he has that leadership quality too. Like I can see in him, he's curious about the world, he's very attentive, and I love that about him. And I wouldn't want that to be snuffed. Like I want it to be nourished. And really also about like how do we create that space for him? I also saw how if I don't give him enough attention, like if I'm not the one going to him, he's going to come to me. But if I take that first step, then he feels like he's getting what he needs and then he's less demanding. And I find that really interesting too.
And I like looking at it in that way. Your child has an attention bucket, they have a power bucket. Those are two core things. They have a safety bucket. And if you can fill these things up proactively, then your child will be seeking those things less in ways that are not optimal. And I like using that word, not optimal, because when we're talking about bad behavior, we start thinking of bad children. There's no such thing as a bad child. There's just a child trying to get their needs met. How can we get them seeking their needs met in optimal ways so they don't start looking for them in non optimal ways?
I never had the opportunity to think about this until I had it in my life. It's like all those things we're learning that once we become moms. But I have one last question to ask you. What would you wish that your sons would say about you one day?
Cool. It's an interesting question. I think I would hope that they would say that they didn't have to hide their true, authentic selves, that their true, authentic selves were accepted, and that they never had to return to being their true, authentic, or find their true, authentic self, because they never had to leave themselves and mask who they were in front of me, that they could just be accepted for who they truly were. So it's a bit of a long-winded way of saying it, but hopefully that makes sense.
It's a beautiful answer. I love it. Thank you. It's been amazing having this conversation. I feel like it could go on forever, but it's such a rich topic. Thank you so much for coming on this show. Where can everybody find you and get to know more about what you do?
Yeah, so if you're on social media, you can find me at Finding Flow Parenting, and you can find me finding.coach is my website. And yeah, I do workshops, I do one-to-one coaching. I'm also a few times a year I do group coaching. And yeah, join my newsletter and yeah, stay in the loop.
So there you have it. Whether you're leading a family or a business, empathy, boundaries, and nervous system awareness are the keys to doing it sustainably and with heart. If this conversation lit something up in you, don't build or parent in isolation. Join us in the Hey Boss Mama Facebook group, your space to connect, share, and grow with other moms building businesses and raising strong-willed humans. Until next time, Boss Mama, keep leading with love. You've got this.